Understanding the Bhagavad-Gita, Part 6, Chapters 13 through 15, taught by Ananta Sesa. The first couple of slokas of Chapter 13, Arjuna begins by raising a question with regards to the field and the knower of the field. And Krishna's response is, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." And so a few lectures back we made mention of this concept of the field. What is the field? What is the knower of the field? And here we're getting a response to that. And Krishna then begins to engage in a description of that field. Slokas 8 through 12, we're told that the field itself is composed of elements of ego, intuition, the senses, desire, aversion, pleasure, pain, and consciousness. These are the primary elements. But very specifically, it states here, humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. And so as we come to gain this knowledge and this understanding, these are the elements that constitute genuine true knowledge, knowledge that matters, knowledge that is of what is true, which is, of course, God is the absolute truth, and we are part and parcel of that divine. And so when we come to know our true self, which means, again, letting go of that false ego, recognizing our true nature and who we are, not allowing ourselves to be caught up in the illusions of Maya. Okay, we look at all these different elements that are presented to us here. This is genuine knowledge. And anything else that is beyond that, it's just ignorance. And it's not going to help us on our advancement. Only these elements constitute true knowledge and true understanding. Slokas 13 through 24, we're told that knowledge will inform one that spirit is the cause in nature which experiences the qualities of nature, and that it's attachment to those qualities that brings about birth. So, we know that we are not these physical bodies. We understand that we are the spirit soul that dwells inside. These various attributes of the world around us are things that produce attachments to us. Again, this material world is very alluring. And so what is it that brings about that ultimate birth into this world and all the problems that accompany it? It's attachment. Attachment to things. Attachment to concepts and ideas. Attachment to people. All of these things is what brings about birth. You know, the Buddhists have a concept which is explained through the wheel of samsara. It's basically the idea of dependent origination. But essentially that wheel of samsara shows us that because of ignorance we are going to suffer. And because of ignorance and suffering, there arises a will to action. Because of a will to action, there is consciousness. Because of consciousness, there's psychophysical existence. Because of psychophysical existence, there are the 6 organs of sense. Because of the organs of sense, there is contact. And because of contact, there is sensation. Because there's sensation, there's craving. And because of craving, there's attachment. Because there's attachment, we have becoming. We have worldly existence. And because of that attachment, we have birth. And because of birth, we have decay, grief, lamentation, physical suffering, dejection, despair. All of these pains are brought about by birth, and birth is caused by our attachment to these material things within this world. There is great suffering to be found within samsara, and so the Buddhist would say that we should seek nirvana, which many times is described as absolute nothingness. But many Western readers find this term, it sort of conjures up this idea of creation from nothingness. Well, this concept implies that reality was created from non-existence, or that something emerged out of nothing, which, is not accurate, because clearly God is there, God is present, and this is where everything emerges from. But within the Buddhist tradition, the world is not something. It's merely an illusion. The reality is sunyata, it's the emptiness. Now, Nagarjuna, who was a great Mahayana Buddhist, explained that everything is empty because it's devoid of self-existence. A thing is not created out of nothingness, and we never speak about the origins of things, never speak about cosmology. Instead, the Buddhist would speak about the myriad things, the 10,000 things that all arrives at once. The beginning and the end are both an illusion. So when the Buddha talks about universal causality, he means that each thing or each event depends upon another thing or event, and it's relative to that thing or event. Well, likewise, truths themselves are only relative or provisional. The world is an illusion. Nagarjuna taught that the higher truth of emptiness is something that has to be experienced, not described. It's something that through discipline a person can experience and understand, but he can't explain it to anyone else. The world that the words that we would use, really, they wouldn't work. Now, the higher truth, these lower relative truths, even including those taught by the Buddha himself, would disappear. The dualities of birth and death, and even the distinction between samsara and nirvana, will ultimately disappear as illusion. When a person experiences emptiness, one transcends the illusion of the self and finds the true self, which of course is no self, and the true mind, which is no mind. Such a person would have found contentment. But without this higher knowledge, one is brought back into the world of samsara in order to suffer. And it's the lack of real knowledge that brings about the illusion. And this is the problem that's explained through that wheel of samsara, through that idea of dependent origination. Now, obviously, the teachings of Krishna consciousness and the teachings of Buddhism, while similar, do have some striking differences. But I think that we can get across from this is the idea that in both instances we see that this world, this material condition, is itself the illusion that is pulling us in, that is alluring us. And the more attached we become to these things, the more that we ultimately cling on to and become forcibly reborn back into this world to suffer again. And so if we want to escape from this, we have to destroy the ignorance that is at the heart of this whole chain of causation. If we can eliminate that ignorance in the first place and focus only upon that higher truth, only upon what is the truth, then we'll be able to escape from samsara. We'll be able to not have to worry about being reborn over and over again into this world to suffer. We will find that salvation, we'll find that liberation through genuine knowledge, not through ignorance and nescience. That's why the Buddhists say if you want to become the Buddha, you must kill the Buddha. And this means you cannot allow yourself to become attached or fixated to anything, including the idea of not being attached or fixated to anything. Because as soon as you have become attached or fixated to that idea that you want to escape from this world, you're lost. You're never going to achieve what you want to achieve because you want to achieve it. And so to become the Buddha, you must kill the Buddha. And not become attached to anything. Then you can escape. Knowledge may allow one to perceive the supersoul in all beings. That person attains liberation, since an imperishable soul dwells in the body free of qualities, does not act, and is not stained. You see, when you get to that point where you're not acting for yourself and you're not being drawn in by attachment to this, that, and the other thing, but rather you are at the point where you are simply acting out of loving devotional service and acting from the standpoint of absolute truth, then your actions are not your actions. You're not stained by the karma of those actions, good or bad. And that's the way to find genuine liberation. Sloka 25 says, "Some perceive the supersoul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive activities." So there are various ways, various methods in which individuals try to attain genuine knowledge. They might do so through the study of scriptures such as Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-Gita, the Vedas, and so on. And others may simply try to work without fruitive activities, offering their services to Krishna. And some may operate through meditation, the chanting on the japa beads of the Mahamantra, the engaging in Sankirtan Yogya, and so forth. And so starting at the 28th sloka, there's a true vision that is explained. And it says, "One who sees the supersoul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the supersoul is ever destroyed, actually sees. One who sees the supersoul in every living being and equal everywhere does not engage himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees." And so at verse 35, one who knowingly sees this difference between the body and the owner of the body, and can understand the process of liberation from this bondage, also attains to the supreme goal. And so the body is something that is physical. The body acts, the body works within this world. But the true self is the soul that dwells inside, the part that is linked as part and parcel of the divine. And so that soul, in and of itself, does not act, at least not for itself. It acts on behalf of the divine. And that's the way to escape from that bondage. In chapter 14, we're introduced to the three modes of material nature. And it says, "It should be understood that all species of life are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving Father. Material nature consists of the three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, he becomes conditioned by these modes." And so you recognize that there are these three modes that are presented to us. And if we look at the graphic on the screen, you find that the mode of goodness, we have knowledge, free from sin, conditioned by sense of happiness. And in the mode of passion, there is unlimited desires, fruitive activities, attractions between men and women. And in ignorance, we have madness, laziness, sleep, intoxication. Now, obviously, if we're going to live within any of these modes, we would want to live and operate within the mode of goodness. But ideally, the person who is letting go of all attachment would let go of all of the modes, all of the qualities. Slokas 6 through 8 tell us that the mode of goodness is bound by attachment to happiness and to knowledge. And so a person who operates from the standpoint of goodness has that capacity to acquire genuine knowledge and eventually to attain happiness. The mode of emotion is bound by attachment to desire and to action. This is someone who operates perhaps on the level of an animal, who is striving towards sense gratification and trying to make things happen and occur for themselves. And the mode of darkness is bound by attachment to ignorance, to confusion, to neglect, to laziness. Okay, and that is, of course, all of the negative and evil qualities. Slokas 14 and 15 say, when one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure, higher planets. When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth amongst those engaged in fruitive activities. And when he dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom. Well, we have to remember that one of the reasons why an individual chants and devotes their service to the Lord is because when a person dies, the thoughts that are on that person's mind will have an effect upon what happens next. And so the mode that you happen to be in, whether it be goodness, passion, or ignorance, is going to have a bearing upon where that individual's next life is going to take place. But you will notice that even within the context of goodness, there is still that sense in which there is a link, there's an attachment there, and you will be born again. Goodness works by knowledge, emotion by greed, and darkness by negligence. By transcending these three modes, the observer perceives and knows the highest truth and will attain that immortality. And actually, we already possess that immortality. The soul, which is our true nature, which is who we are, is immortal. And there's no way around that. It's simply the way that things are. But we don't realize it. We don't come to understand it and comprehend it. And that's where the problem is. As long as we're in those, operating from any of those three modes, we're still accumulating karma, whether good or bad. And it's that karma, that attachment, that is going to pull us back into this world again and make us forget about our true nature. But if we can escape from, transcend beyond those modes, then we would have a recognition and acknowledgement of that immortality, and we'd be able to enjoy our true nature, our true self. So to achieve this transcendence, we should become impartial and undisturbed by all of the qualities. And so, at Sloka 26, one who engages in full devotional service does not fall down in any circumstance, and once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus come to the level of Brahman. So if an individual begins to, again, chant the holy names, engage in pure loving devotional service, that individual is on the path of Krishna consciousness. They are on their way back to Godhead. But because the allure of the material nature is so strong, we might potentially fall down on this. We might backtrack on this. But we have to remember that no work done on this path is ever lost. There's an accumulating ledger that is taking place. And that ledger is going to continue to build. And in our next life, we can build upon what is in that book. And the next life after that, we can build further. And so even if we continue to slide backwards, even if we continue to falter, we are still working towards it. None of this service is ever lost. Not completely. And eventually, no matter how many lifetimes it takes, we can all attain that position where we've let go of those material conditions where we've transcended beyond the modes of goodness and passion and ignorance, when we've attained that highest level, and we once again perceive our true constitutional position, and we take our rightful place. And at this point, we're going to have to stop here for tonight, and we'll pick up with Chapter 15 in our next lecture. Hare Krishna.